Bridgeport Evening Farmer, May 7, 1915. Cunarda Lusitania sunk by torpedo off coast of Ireland, passengers safe. London, May 7. The Cunard liner Lusitania was torpedoed and sunk today off Old Head, Kinsale, Ireland. Early reports, yet unconfirmed, are that the 1,253 passengers aboard are safe. Assistance has been sent. The liner was struck early this morning and remained afloat until 2 o'clock this afternoon, it is unofficially reported. Confirmation was received here in a dispatch from Kinsale, which said that 20 boats from the Lusitania, all jammed with passengers, are in the vicinity where the liner sank. Rescue ships are making for them. New York gets confirmation of loss of Lusitania. Passenger list is big, including notable Americans. New York, May 7. The New York office of the Cunard Line this afternoon announced that the Lusitania has been sunk off the Irish coast. Reports here are that the passengers, numbering 1,310, are safe. The list includes prominent Americans. Confirmation of the loss of the big liner came in a dispatch dated Queenstown, 4:59. The dispatch said that the passengers are believed to be safe and that every available ship is being sent to the rescue of the small boats. If the reports are true that the Lusitania was torpedoed at 2 o'clock this morning and that she did not go down until 2:30 this afternoon, she was afloat for more than 12 hours, a period of time which undoubtedly gave opportunity for efforts at the removal of passengers. It is not known just how far from shore the Lusitania was when she was struck. A dispatch from London set forth that assistance was sent to her. Passengers reported to be safe. London, May 7. A dispatch to the Cunard office here reports that all of the passengers of the Lusitania have been saved. This is unconfirmed as yet. Wireless used to call aid. Liverpool, May 7. The Land's End Wireless reports distress signals made by Lusitania as follows. Come at once. Big list. Position 10 miles west Kinsale. Boats rushing to the rescue. London, May 7. Confirmation of the sinking of the Lusitania was received in a dispatch dated Queenstown 4:59 p.m. Today and reading as follows. Old Head, Kinsale, about 20 boats, all sorts belonging to Lusitania, are in vicinity where sunk. About 15 boats are making for the spot to rescue. No word about passengers. Liverpool, May 7. The Echo has been informed that a message to the Cunard Line reads as follows. The Lusitania was torpedoed and sunk at 2:33 this afternoon off Kinsale. There is no word of her passengers or crew, who numbered over 1,900. Reported sunk in daylight. London, May 7. The manager of the Cunard Company has informed the Liverpool Evening Press that he received this afternoon the following message from the wireless station at Old Head, off Kinsale. The Lusitania was sunk by a submarine at 2:33 this afternoon, 8 miles south by west, off this point. Washington sees problem ahead. Washington, May 7. News of the torpedoing of the Lusitania struck official Washington like a bomb. While disposed to await full details before expressing opinions, all administration officials realized that the incident was probably the most serious Washington has faced since the beginning of the war. Report Lusitania was beached. New York, May 7. The Dow & Jones Company ticker service in a report from London declares the Lusitania was beached and passengers and crew, according to Lloyd's, were saved. President told of disaster. Washington, May 7. President Wilson was informed of the sinking of the Lusitania, and White House officials showed keen anxiety to learn whether any American lives were lost. No comment was made. In doubt about passengers. London, May 7. A dispatch from Liverpool to the Exchange Telegraph Company says, it is not known how many of the Lusitania's passengers were saved. Confirmation by New York office. New York, May 7. The news of her sinking was announced by the local office of the Cunard Line and was based on cabled advices received from the home office of the company in Liverpool. 3 dispatches received in the order named were made public by the line as follows. We received from the Land's End wireless station news of repeated distress calls made by the Lusitania asking for assistance at once. Big list. Position 10 miles south Kinsale. subsequently received telegram from Queenstown that all available craft in the harbor had been dispatched to assist. The second message to the local office read, Queenstown, for 59 p.m. wire begins. About 20 boats of all sorts belonging to our line are in vicinity, where Lusitania sunk. About 15 other boats are making for spot to render assistance. First cabin passenger list shows name of notable men. 5 Bridgeporters on torpedoed steamship. 5 Bridgeporters are known to have been on the Lusitania. They all booked passage about 2 weeks ago at the S. Lowith & Co. steamship office in this city. They are Isaac B. Trumbull, Secretary and Treasurer of the American Cycle Car Co., James H. Brooks, Salesman, Weed Chain and Tire Grip Co., Mrs. Roland Anderson, 124, Wheeler Avenue. Barbara Anderson, aged 2 years, 124, Wheeler Avenue. John Thurston, farmer. Mr. Trumbull was on his way to England to conduct some business for his firm in the sale of Trumbull cars. Mr. Brooks was also on the way to England to do business for his firm. Thurston, whose address is not known, was in a hospital here several weeks and has just been released before the Lusitania sailed. He booked passage immediately. No other Bridgeporters are known to have been on the ship, although some may have bought their tickets in New York and failed to be recorded here. Lusitania, one of speediest afloat. New York, May 7th. The Lusitania was one of the largest of transatlantic liners, as well as one of the speediest. She was built in Glasgow in 1906. She was 785 feet long, 88 feet beam, and 60 feet deep. Her gross tonnage was 32,500 and her net tonnage 9,145. She was owned by the Cunard Steamship Co. Limited of Liverpool. Her captain was W. T. Turner. Her fastest trip, made on the western voyage, was 4 days, 11 hours, 42 minutes. This record, however, was wrested from her subsequently by the Mauretania, her sister ship built a few months later, which has been in service for the British Navy during the war. The Lusitania had accommodations for 550 first-class cabin passengers.
Carson City Daily Appeal, May 7, 1915. Lusitania sunk off coast of Ireland at 2:30 o'clock. Vessel sailed Saturday with 1,400 passengers, many of whom had received warning of impending disaster. 300 had been landed at Clonakilly. Steamer floated 33 minutes before sinking. By United Press, Liverpool, May 7th. The Lusitania, with a heavy passenger list of Americans, was torpedoed and sunk off Old Head near Kindale, Ireland this afternoon. No fatalities have yet been reported. Small boats were rushed from Queenstown to the scene. Cunard officials report that the Lusitania was torpedoed at 2:33 this afternoon. Lloyd's had confirmed the sinking of the big passenger steamer, placing at 2:15. The report of the Lusitania being in distress was when a Land's End Wireless picked up a message saying steamer listing badly needed assistance. Unconfirmed rumors are rife in London tonight that an infernal machine sank the Lusitania, but this is denied by the Cunard manager, who says a submarine sunk her. Warnings came true. By United Press, New York, May 7th. The Lusitania sailed from here Saturday with 1,400 passengers, many of them prominent Americans, including Charles Froham, Alfred Vanderbilt, Elbert Hubbard, and Charles Klein. Also, the following Los Angeles people were on board: Albert Bialik and wife, and S. Campbell Johnson and wife. Before the ship sailed Saturday, many prominent passengers received telegrams and letters warning them that the vessel would be sunk. This afternoon, the Cunard offices were besieged by relatives and friends of the passengers. The Cunard officials made public the cables as fast as received. State Department busy. By United Press, Washington, May 7th. President Wilson refused to comment on the Lusitania incident. Secretary Bryan hurried to the State Department and attempted to establish communication with United States consuls near the scene of the disaster. 300 passengers landed. By United Press, Liverpool, May 7th. Information reached the Cunard officers late this afternoon that the Lusitania was torpedoed at 2 o'clock and sank at 2:33. It is believed the same submarine was responsible for the sinking of the Centurion and Candidate. Unconfirmed reports state the liner rests in shallow water and possibly could be salvaged. Cork newspaper reports received here state that 300 passengers were landed at Clonakilly, will repudiate responsibility. By United Press, Washington, May 7th, it is generally believed here that Germany will repudiate responsibility toward America for the sinking of the Lusitania.
Elko Independent, May 7, 1915. Lusitania sunk with 1,253 people. Blown up off Kinsale, Ireland, many prominent Americans aboard. Elbert and Alice Hubbard, Vanderbilt, Charles Frohman, and Charles Klein were on boat. Fate of passengers yet unknown. Situation regarded in Washington as most serious since the war began. Manager Cunard Line blames German submarine. London report says internal explosion. Special to the Independent, London, May 7th. The Cunard liner Lusitania, one of the largest passenger steamers in the service, with 1,253 passengers on board, was sunk off the coast of Kinsale, Ireland, this afternoon. Among the American passengers on board were Alfred G. Vanderbilt, Charles Frohman, Mr. and Mrs. Elbert Hubbard, and Charles Klein. Passengers on the steamship which sailed from New York on Saturday had received anonymous warnings that the vessel would be destroyed, but gave these warnings little attention. United States Ambassador Page cables that the Lusitania sank in 30 minutes, and that no word has been received as to the passengers. A report from Lloyd says that all on board are believed to have been saved. The manager of the Cunard line blames the disaster to a German submarine. An unconfirmed report in London declares that the loss of the ship was due to an internal explosion. A rush of selling orders on receipt of the news in New York of the disaster has caused sharp declines in leading issues of the New York Stock Exchange. News of the sinking of the Lusitania strikes the officials in Washington like a bomb, and orders have been rushed for an immediate investigation to ascertain the cause, also for full information as to deaths and injuries. Investigations are also ordered relative to the anonymous letters which gave warning of the sinking. The incident is regarded as the most serious that the United States has faced since the beginning of the war. The Admiralty at Queenstown have no news concerning the safety of the passengers. All that could be obtained from there was that word had been received from the Lusitania at 3:25 o'clock that the ship was sinking. The Lusitania was made famous at the time of the sinking of the Titanic when that ship struck an iceberg and hundreds of lives were lost. It was the first to reach the distressed ship and picked up the survivors and brought them to New York.
Evening Ledger, May 7, 1915. Liner Lusitania sunk by a German submarine. This drawing by a staff artist of the Evening Ledger gives an idea of the probable scene which took place off the Irish coast when the Great Lusitania was torpedoed, the report of which is confirmed. Giant steamship goes to bottom or is beached after being hit in Atlantic Ocean, 8 miles off head of Kinsale, on the south coast of Ireland, nearly 1,400 aboard. One report says vessel has been run ashore, but all others declare she went down. Distinguished Americans on ship, having sailed from New York despite warning given out by the German embassy. London, May 7th. The Cunard liner Lusitania was torpedoed by a German submarine at 2:33 o'clock this afternoon in the Atlantic Ocean, 8 miles off the head of Kinsale, on the south coast of Ireland. Practically all reports received here state that the Lusitania sank, but Lloyd's report received at 5:28 p.m. said that she had been beached. The Lusitania was bound for Liverpool from New York with 1,400 passengers, including scores of prominent Americans, on board. At 5:25 o'clock this morning, Lloyd's issued a statement saying that the Lusitania was believed to have been blown up by an internal machine on board the vessel, but stated that it was impossible to obtain details. "We have no details," says the Lloyd statement, "as to the passengers and crew, but it is considered probable that they are safe." The first news that the Lusitania had met with disaster came in a dispatch from Queenstown, which said, "Land's End Wireless reported the following distress call made by the Lusitania. Come at once. Big list. Position 10 miles south of Kinsale." Subsequently, word was received here that all the available craft in the harbors on the southern coast of Ireland had been dispatched to the Lusitania's assistance. At 4:59 p.m., a Queenstown dispatch reported the receipt of a message from Kinsale saying, "About 20 boats of the sort belonging to the Lusitania are in the vicinity where she was sunk. About 15 boats are making for the spot to render assistance." The regular dispatch from Galley Head, about 20 miles west-southwest of Kinsale Head, timed 4:25 p.m. Later received by the Admiralty as follows. Several boats apparently filled with survivors of the Lusitania sighted 9 miles southeast. A Greek steamer is proceeding to assist. Other vessels to rescue. In addition to the boats dispatched from southern Irish port, fast steamships were hurried from Liverpool, Waterford, and Cork, British destroyers, which have been patrolling the southern coast of Ireland and St. George's Channel, were sent at full speed towards Kinsale Head. Despite the Lloyd's report that the passengers and crew of the Lusitania were considered safe, the belief was general here this evening that the loss might have been heavy. As soon as news was received here that the Lusitania had been sunk, the Cunard offices were besieged by anxious inquirers. At the same time, scores of Americans visited the United States Embassy clamoring for news of the Americans who were on board the Cunard boat. At first, the public was skeptical, believing it was impossible for German submarines to catch the big liner unawares. The Admiralty had taken pains to guard the Lusitania and other big liners in the belief that their services concluded on page 2, column 6. 17 Philadelphians on board torpedoed steamship Lusitania. Cunard office here is swamped with inquiries from relatives and friends of passengers, fearful of their fate. At least 17 Philadelphians sailed on the ill-fated Lusitania last Saturday. Harry J. Kessler, of Jenkintown, vice president of the Philadelphia National Bank, was among the first who booked passage on the ship and among those whose eyes flashed with disdain when mysterious, anonymous rumors came that the liner was to be destroyed by a submarine. He was on business for the bank. W. Sterling Hodges, of 1832, North 12th Street, accompanied by Mrs. Hodges with their son, W. Sterling Hodges, Jr., 9 years old, and daughter, Dean Hodges, 5 years old, sailed for Liverpool, en route for France. There Mr. Hodges was to represent the Baldwin Locomotive Works in arranging for the purchase of locomotives to the French government. Mrs. W. C. Hodges, Mr. Hodges' widowed mother, who lives at the North 12th Street address, broke down and wept when told the ship had gone down, shrieking into the telephone instrument, "My God, this is terrible." David Todd, a florist of 5540 Chester Avenue, is another resident of this city known to have started on the Cunarder. Crowds began to gather outside the offices of the Cunard Line at the northwest corner of the 13th and Walnut Streets, within a few minutes after 1 o'clock, when the news of the disaster reached the public. Telephone calls began to pour into the office within a few minutes, swamping the staff of clerks. At first, it was not admitted that any accident had taken place. Not until news from Lloyd's came into the financial offices, and it became clear to everyone that, concluded on page 2, column 6.
The West Virginian, May 8, 1915. 1,500 persons perish when Lusitania sinks. 51 out of 188 Americans aboard reported saved. Vanderbilt may be dead. First cabin passengers calmly finish luncheon after torpedoes hit ship. Submarine struck without warning. 2 torpedoes crash into vessel's side, many persons being killed by the explosions. Score die after being removed to hospitals. Captain Turner among those saved. London, May 8. 1,500 persons lost their lives, the British Admiralty estimates, when the Cunard Line steamship Lusitania was torpedoed off Old Head Kinsale on the Irish coast. The known survivors number only 658, while there were 2,160 souls aboard the great liner when she was attacked. Of those who were saved, 595 were landed at Queenstown and 11 at Kinsale, while 52 others are reported to be aboard a steamer. All but one of the rescuing fleet of torpedo boats, tugs, and trawlers which went out from Queenstown have reported. There is a slender hope that fishing boats may have rescued a few. In addition to the living brought ashore, the bodies of 45 who died of injuries or were drowned had been landed at Queenstown. 5 more are at Kinsale, and it has been reported that an armed trawler accompanied by 2 fishing boats has picked up 100 others. The work of compiling a list of the saved is difficult because of the confusion at Queenstown, but apparently few first cabin passengers are among the survivors. Many Americans lost. The United States consul at that port can account for only 51 Americans saved out of 188 who are aboard. His role does not include the names of Alfred G. Vanderbilt, Charles Frohman, Albert Hubbard, Justice Foreman, the author, or Charles Klein, the playwright. Of the Americans aboard, 106 were in the first cabin, 65 in the second, and 17 in the steerage. The heavy loss of life among first cabin passengers is believed to be due to the calmness and self-possession they displayed in face of danger. Most of them were at luncheon when the steamer received her death blow and declined to join the rush for boats and life belts. They believed the Lusitania would remain afloat until assistance could arrive. A considerable proportion of those at Queenstown are members of the crew, including Captain Turner, with the first and second officers. All the other officers are believed to have perished. There is no evidence, however, that the rule of the sea, women and children first, was violated. No panic aboard. At least one of the survivors, a Toronto newspaperman, gives evidence that there was no panic among the crew and the sailors acted promptly in getting passengers into the boats. Apparently, every precaution had been taken against the surprise attack by a submarine. Lookouts were on the alert constantly as the giant steamers speeded toward the Irish coast. Difficulty was experienced in launching the boats because of the heavy list of the Lusitania. Almost immediately after she was torpedoed, several of the trail crafts evidently capsized as they were launched or soon after. Lifebelts used. Many of the passengers owe their rescue to lifebelts, which kept them afloat until they were picked up by boats. Among this number was Lady Mackworth, daughter of David Thomas, the Welsh coal king, and Julian de Ayala, the Cuban consul general at Liverpool. Investigation has failed to reveal that the steamer was given warning of a proposed attack by the submarine, which appears to have been lurking off the Irish coast, bent on destroying the largest and fastest ship engaged in transatlantic travel. The lookout sighted the periscope of the submarine 1,000 yards away, and the next instant saw the trail left by a torpedo as it flashed on its course. Then came a terrific crash as the missile pierced the liner's side, followed almost immediately by another, which littered the deck with wreckage. The course of the liner was at once turned to shore. For torpedoes apparently were fired at the Lusitania, but only 2 found their mark. Torpedoes kill many. The loss of life caused by the torpedoes themselves must have been terribly heavy. The tragic freight of bodies taken to Queenstown bears evidence of the havoc wrought. Many of those taken ashore were seriously injured, and more than a score died after they were removed to the hospitals at Cork and Queenstown. Probably no event of the war has caused such intense excitement in London as the sinking of the Lusitania. Enormous crowds surrounded the offices of the Cunard Line all night, scanning anxiously the bulletins from Queenstown. The company announced that an accurate list of survivors would be compiled as speedily as possible, but that the immediate needs of those saved were being given first attention. The press of London expressed intense indignation over the tragedy. Liverpool, May 8th. Alfred Booth, managing director of the Cunard Steamship Company, made the following statement today: "I desire to send my heartfelt sympathy, wherein all the Cunard directors and managers join, to relatives and friends of the American passengers murdered by the German submarine. I am certain the whole civilized world is as one in grief for the sorrow and suffering caused, and in loathing for this treacherous attack on innocent lives, so many of whom were women and children. Every possible step is being taken to relieve the immediate wants of the survivors at Queenstown after their terrible experience." London, May 8th. The Press Bureau is informed by the Admiralty that no more reports regarding the Lusitania have been received, and that the number of survivors already given may be regarded as approximately correct. Inquiries are being made along the coast, but there is little hope of news of further survivors. London, May 8th. The Exchange Telegraph Company has received today the following telegram from Copenhagen. Berlin newspapers print the news of the sinking of the Lusitania in colossal type and hail the successful torpedoing of the ship as a new triumph for Germany's naval policy. A general impression is that England has got what she deserves. London, May 8th. The British government today made the following statement. The statement appearing in some newspapers that the Lusitania was armed is wholly false. Washington is mum on sinking of Lusitania. President and advisors wait for facts before deciding course. Ask Germans to report. England denies report that the sunken steamship was armed. Washington, May 8th, shocked and appalled by the tragic aspect of the Lusitania disaster as developments disclose its magnitude and far-reaching possibilities, with the probable loss of 137 American lives. President Wilson and his advisors are waiting for all the facts and for a crystallization of public opinion to aid in laying out the course the United States will pursue in this latest international complication, the gravest the president has faced since the outbreak of the war. Nowhere in administration circles is there any disposition to minimize the situation, but President Wilson, while seeking the facts, hopes the country will assume an examining attitude and reserve full judgment until all complete information is at hand. As more details begin coming in, activities at the White House and the executive department of the government disclose how much the administration officials realize the tension of the situation. Secretary Bryan cabled Ambassador Gerard at Berlin to informally ask the German government for its report of the disaster, and to Ambassador Page at London be sent a message urging renewed efforts to aid the suffering and gather information. President Wilson, while he went to the golf links for recreation, left strict instructions to be notified of any important dispatches. Chairman Stone, of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, issued a statement counseling calmness and advising, "Don't rock the boat." Chairman Stone pointed out that qualifying circumstances must be taken into consideration because the Lusitania was a belligerent vessel, but he considered the attack on the American steamer Gulflight a much more serious offense against neutral rights. The president, Secretary Bryan, and other members of the cabinet were visibly depressed. Persons who, continued on page 2. Enterprise shown in extra on Lusitania catastrophe. Remarkable enterprise was shown by the West Virginian in getting out a special edition of 1,500 copies yesterday afternoon with a long story of the sinking of the Cunard liner Lusitania and magnificent pictures covering nearly two-thirds of a page, showing the ill-fated vessel and several prominent Americans who were among the passengers. This morning, 12 hours after the catastrophe, other papers of the state failed to print even a single picture of the torpedoed vessel or of any of the victims of the disaster. Not a single paper in West Virginia or Pennsylvania, and few, if any, papers anywhere in the United States, either yesterday afternoon or this morning, printed as many pictures in connection with the disaster as did the West Virginian. This splendid newspaper feature serves to show the unparalleled facilities at the command of the West Virginian for the gathering of facts of interest and pictures of great news event throughout the world. The first tip of the sinking of the steamship and the probable appalling list of fatalities was received by long-distance telephone from the Associated Press by the efficient West Virginian telegraph editor. When the Germans published notices a week ago warning those booked for passage on the Lusitania that the vessel would be torpedoed, the West Virginian promptly arranged for photographs for publication in case the Germans made good their threat. As a result, excellent pictures were in the West Virginian office in readiness for reproduction when the news of the disaster reached the paper over the Associated Press wires.
The Washington Times, May 8, 1915. All England demands reprisals on Germany. Sinking of the Lusitania with death toll of 1,346 brings storm of protest over failure to safeguard liner. London, May 8th. England faces a political crisis as a result of the sinking of the Cunard liner Lusitania by a German submarine off the old HeadlinesthruHistory Sail, Ireland, yesterday. With practically all reports in, the Admiralty officially places a number rescued at 703, making the staggering death total of 1,346. A storm of protest is sweeping in from all over England and indignation over the failure of the Admiralty to furnish protection to the great liner and its human freight, in face of the warning given by the Germans, is voiced on every hand. When Parliament convenes Monday, it is certain that the government must face a grilling over the disaster and settle the question of reprisals against Germany. Washington's attitude is puzzling officials, and an announcement of what the U.S. intends to do following its warning that Germany will be held to strict accountability for the loss of American lives. Upon this declaration will hinge the attitude of the government when it meets the attacks of the opposition Monday. Among the prominent Americans among the missing and who are virtually admitted to be lost are Alfred G. Vanderbilt, at first reported to have been saved, Charles Frohman, noted theatrical producer, also Charles Klein, Elber Hubbard, and other notables. Among the officers saved was Captain Turner, who is said to have been taken from the water almost 3 hours after the Lusitania sank. Second Officer Lewis, the second and third engineers. 51 members of the crew are among the rescued. Intense feeling was stirred by the reports from Berlin that the press generally glorified in the sinking of the Lusitania, boasting of it as a fresh triumph for the Kaiser's Navy. The Admiralty at 2:15 this afternoon said that the latest reports available indicated that only 703 of the passengers and crew of the Lusitania have been saved, and that 1,346 have probably been lost. At that hour, the Admiralty informed the Press Bureau that it had no further reports of rescues, and that it regarded the above figures as approximately correct, although inquiries were still being made all along the coast. It is certain that the government will be swamped with pointed inquiries when Parliament reconvenes on Monday. Already, Lord Charles Beresford has announced that he will interrogate Premier Asquith. There will be a volley of questions for the officials of the government, as a number of members favor reprisals of equal violence directed against Germany. Officials are anxiously awaiting information as to what action Washington plans to.
The Washington Herald, May 8, 1915. 1,000 dead in Lusitania disaster fears Cunard Company. Only 500 saved, reports ship's officer. New York, May 7th. At the Cunard offices in this city, it was impossible tonight to obtain a reliable estimate of the number of persons saved from the Lusitania. The following cable message, received at 10 p.m. from the company's offices in Liverpool, contained the only authoritative information which the officials of the line had received. Queenstown wires. First Officer Jones thinks about 500 to 600 were saved. This includes passengers and crew, and is the only estimate we are able to make. In the meantime, we are going through the hotels and lodging houses tonight and will wire tomorrow the fullest possible list. Meanwhile, the injured and dead are taking all our attention. This message was sent from Liverpool at 9:17 p.m. when the attention of the Cunard officials was called to the fact that they had previously reported 300 landed at Clonakilty and that the London Times had received a dispatch from Cork saying that 700 had been landed at Clonakilty. They replied, "This estimate by First Officer Jones is the only authoritative one we have been able to get. The statement that 300 had been landed at Clonakilty was merely a report which had been sent to our offices in Queenstown. We have no information as to its accuracy, and we know nothing about the report from Cork that 700 were landed at Clonakilty. Tomorrow we hope to have definite information, but until that comes we can make no estimate of the number saved." Another cable message timed 9:45 p.m. at Liverpool said, "Queenstown wires as follows. The tug Stormcock landed 150 passengers and crew. It is reported by the Admiralty that the trawlers Dock and Indian Empire have about 200. The tug Flying Fish has about 100. 3 torpedo boats have 45 and 4 dead. We are putting those landed up at the hotels and boarding houses, but we cannot get a list of survivors before morning, as the passengers are in such state that their immediate wants must be our first consideration." The Cunard officials were unable to say whether the rescued enumerated in this dispatch were in addition to those reported by First Officer Jones or not, but they were inclined to believe this was merely confirmatory of Jones' dispatch. The belief prevailed at the Cunard offices that the number of dead would eventually prove to be nearly 1,000. This belief was based on the fact that 14 hours had elapsed since the sinking of the Lusitania, and that practically all of the boats had had plenty of time to come ashore and be heard from. Assuming that 700 had been landed at Clonakilty, 500 at Queenstown, and possibly 100 at Kinsale, this would leave nearly 1,000 still to be accounted for. All the reports indicate that many injured and some dead have been brought ashore. A bulletin received at 11 p.m. announced that the wife and son of Gen H.B. Lassiter of London had been saved. Another bulletin received a few minutes later announced the safety of Miss Jessie Taft Smith of Braceville, Ohio, and George H. Kessler of New York. There were 184 Americans on board the Lusitania. The other passengers included 961 British, 72 Russians, 16 Persians, 6 French, 5 Greeks, and 2 Mexicans. German war blockade zone where Big Liner was sunk. X marks the spot, 10 miles south of Kinsale and 23 miles south of Cork, where Lusitania sank. Kinsale is a town on the southern coast of Ireland, 13 miles south-northwest of Cork. South of Kinsale, the head of Kinsale juts out into the Atlantic Ocean. It is southwest of St. George's Channel, through which the Lusitania would have to pass in order to reach Liverpool. For several days, German submarines have been operating in the waters along the south coast of Ireland. The British liner Centurion and Candidate were torpedoed yesterday off Koningbeg Lightship, which is 87 miles east-northeast of Kinsale Head. Half the passengers have been saved, American Embassy in London hears. London, May 8th, 1 a.m., the Cunard liner Lusitania was torpedoed by a German submarine off the southeast coast of Ireland, near the entrance to St. George's Channel, yesterday afternoon. According to reports, she received no warning and sank in 18 minutes. The Lusitania had on board 2,067 persons, 1,251 of whom were passengers, according to official figures from the Cunard offices. A message to the Admiralty states that between 500 and 600 passengers have been landed at Queenstown. At midnight, 700 survivors have been landed at Clonacilty, near Cork, Ireland, and 3 other boats with rescued passengers were reported making the harbor at that hour. Other passengers have been landed at Kinsale. The number arriving there was not reported. Great loss of life is feared despite the hopeful statements issued by government and steamship offices. The last official statement to be issued before midnight came from the American Embassy. It read, "The embassy has just received a message stating that about half of the passengers of the Lusitania have been saved. The ship sank in 18 minutes. The fact that more than half the passengers had been reported safe at that hour made the watchers who surrounded the Cunard offices more hopeful still." The first ominous warning that the loss of life might be heavy came from the Cunard office in the following bulletin. "There is every reason to hope that many passengers have been saved." Cablegrams flooded the offices of the line, inquiring for the safety of hundreds of prominent persons aboard. Among the well-known persons on the passenger list were Alfred G. Vanderbilt, Elbert H. Hubbard and Mrs. Hubbard, Lady Mackworth, and Sir Hugh Lee. Suffering and hardships for passengers and crew in the disaster were hinted at in a message to the Admiralty from Queenstown, reporting that between 500 and 600 passengers had been landed there. The dispatch stated that many hospital cases were included, some of whom have died. The message was sent by the Cunard Line office at Queenstown and followed a report that 3 steamers were approaching the harbor with survivors aboard. A later dispatch to the Admiralty from the Admiral in command of the fleet at Queenstown stated that the injured were being sent to the naval and military hospitals for treatment. The Admiral's report gave no names of victims, nor did it state that their number was great. At 9:12 o'clock last night, the Admiralty received a report from Queenstown that several boats, supposed to belong to the Lusitania, had been sighted 9 miles southeast of Queenstown. The Cunard offices at 9:40 p.m. received the following message. "A motor fishing boat has picked up 2 boatloads of passengers numbering about 50. The tug Stormcock is taking passengers from fishing boats, which have rescued them from the Cunard boats. A majority of the rescue vessels are making for Queenstown. Among the rescuing boats was a fleet of 10 trawlers and a lifeboat from Queenstown. At the time of the disaster, the weather was fine. The sun was beating down hotly, and a gentle breeze was blowing. Weather conditions were similar to those prevailing at the time of the Titanic disaster. Government afraid people will demand declaration of war. Popular feeling in the United States may be deaf to neutrality pleas and cry out for stern methods of reprisal, not only for what occurred to the Lusitania, but previous affronts to our commerce and citizens. Officials decline to talk until they have received all facts. President Wilson may call Congress into special setting and present case for its judgment. Case presents no new legal phases. German embassy happy at this disaster. Warning was to ease our consciences. Official Washington was stunned by the news of the torpedoing and sinking of the Lusitania. The dismay which followed the first indefinite reports of the tragedy gave place to a more hopeful view as subsequent information began to indicate that the passengers had been saved. With later unofficial advices indicating a heavy loss of life, the gloom in official circles deepened, and there was no attempt to conceal the fact that the United States is finally face to face with a situation which may precipitate a rupture with Germany. Wilson and cabinet members worried. The immediate effect of the staggering news was to seal the lips of all high officials so far as public comment was concerned. The president and his advisors immediately determined to suspend judgment and to refrain from any expression of opinion until all the facts have been officially ascertained. The deep anxiety under which they were laboring was, however, plainly apparent. What the administration most fears as the result of the sinking of the Lusitania is that it may prove to be the spark inflaming the hitherto rather complacent public opinion in this country with regard to the activities of Germany on the high seas and the destruction of American life and property. May arouse American people's ire. What is feared in Washington is that the sending of the Lusitania to the bottom with disregard for American life will start a wave of anti-German feeling in the United States, which will be deaf to all argument on points of law. The compelling human force of the tragedy is the factor that is giving officials the greatest concern this morning. The fear is expressed that the tremendous shock of this event will arouse the American public, as the other cases involving precisely the same principle have failed to do. Suggestions were heard in Washington last night that if the loss of American life on the Lusitania was great, the president might call Congress in session to consider the matter. Inquiries in official quarters failed to disclose any basis for these reports, and it is certain that the president is not considering this move at present. It is admitted that the Lusitania case presents legally no new issue to this government. All the issues involved in this case have already been brought before the State Department in the cases of the Falaba, the Gulf Flight, and the Cushing. Officials want all facts first. The probabilities are that the first effort of the administration will be to counsel a suspension of judgment in the Lusitania case until, to use the official phrase, all the facts have been obtained. The situation is all the more grave in view of the attitude, which there is every reason to believe Germany will take regarding the matter. Every indication obtainable here last night in German quarters is that Germany will disclaim all responsibility so far as the loss of any American lives is concerned, by reason of the repeated warnings given by Germany to Americans to keep off British ships, continued on page 2. List of the Lusitania's first cabin passengers. New York, May 7th. The Lusitania sailed from New York for Liverpool last Saturday, with 1,388 passengers, the largest number carried eastbound by any transatlantic liner leaving New York this year. First cabin passengers listed as sailing were. "600 landed at Queenstown. Admiralty also learns many passengers saved that can sail. The Admiralty has received a message from Queenstown saying that between 500 and 600 have been landed at Queenstown, including many hospital cases, some of whom have died. A number have also been landed at Kinsale Head. This message was timed 8:29 p.m. at Liverpool and was signed Cunard Line. Anxiety felt for 2 vessels. Anxiety is felt for the safety of 2 large vessels which left New York last Saturday, at the time the Lusitania departed. They are the Rotterdam of the Holland American Line, bound for Rotterdam, and the New York of the American Line, bound for Liverpool. The route of the Rotterdam purposely is being kept secret, and her exact position is unknown to officials of the company. She is scheduled to reach Rotterdam on Monday. The New York is scheduled to be off the coast of Ireland this morning. She is expected to dock tomorrow morning in the Miri. She probably will pass Kinsale, Ireland, the point off which the Lusitania was torpedoed, about 2 o'clock this afternoon, the time the Cunarder was sunk. Both vessels carried unusually large passenger lists when they left last Saturday, despite the warning given them by the German ambassador. The New York was almost filled to her capacity when she left. Ever since the war started, she has carried large passenger lists, because of the fact that she has a neutral registry.